All right, today on The Explainer, we're diving into the absolutely wild story of Japan's economy. Seriously, it's a journey that goes from a post-war miracle that stunned the world to a decades-long disaster. So, you have to ask, right? How does that even happen? How does an economic rocket ship just stall and fall back to Earth? We're talking about one of the most incredible economic stories of the 20th century, which then took this dramatic, dark turn that has lessons for literally every nation today.
To really get what's happening now, you have to see the insane heights they reached. In the 80s, Japan was an absolute giant. Its land was supposedly worth 4 times more than all the land in the US. But today, it's struggling with massive debt and stagnant wages. This insane contrast is really the heart of the story. Okay, so let's rewind. After World War II, Japan was just in ruins, total devastation. But its old enemy, the United States, was getting really worried about communism spreading through Asia. So they stepped in with this radical plan to rebuild the country.
America basically decided to turn Japan into this shining example of capitalism. The strategy was pretty simple, but unbelievably powerful. First, pump in a ton of cash. Second, hand over the keys, the technology and blueprints. And third, give them a giant, hungry market to sell all their stuff to. And oh boy, did it work. I mean, it worked spectacularly. Over the next 30 years, Japan just transformed. It became this economic titan, completely dominating global manufacturing. Think about it. By the 1980s, the average income went from just a few $100 to $25,000. It was incredible. But here's the twist. Japan got so good, so successful, that it started to eat America's lunch. American industries were getting hollowed out. All of a sudden, the student was outperforming the teacher. And that created a lot of fear and, frankly, a lot of anger in the very country that helped them get there.
American companies like Chrysler were teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, laying off thousands. Meanwhile, Japanese companies were just crushing it in cars, electronics, and now even the supercritical semiconductor market. You could feel the tension building.
And that anger, it literally spilled out onto the streets. You had auto workers smashing Japanese cars on TV. American politicians looked at this and realized, whoa, Japan isn't our little project anymore. They're a powerful rival, and we need to do something about it. So that something was the Plaza Accord in 1985. Now, what this was, essentially, was the U.S. getting a bunch of countries together to force up the value of Japan's currency, the yen. The goal? Make Japanese goods way more expensive. And the impact was just bam, immediate and shocking. The yen basically doubled in value in just 2 years. Think about what that means. A Toyota that used to sell for, say, 10 grand in the US now had to be priced at 20 grand just to make the same profit. Japan's biggest advantage, their cheap exports, was just wiped out almost overnight. So, to fight this, to stop their export economy from completely collapsing, Japan's central bank made a decision that would change everything. They slashed interest rates way down, flooding the economy with incredibly cheap money. But here's the thing about all that cheap cash. It didn't go where it was supposed to. It wasn't used for innovation or making factories better. Nope. It just fueled this massive wild party of pure speculation in stocks and real estate. One of the biggest financial bubbles in history was born.
The stock market went absolutely insane. The Nikkei index just shot for the moon, tripling in a few years. It seemed like you couldn't lose. Everyone, from giant corporations to regular folks, was jumping in, convinced the party would never end.
And this right here, this quote tells you everything you need to know about how warped things got. Even Toyota, a legendary car manufacturer, found it was more profitable to just play the stock market than to, actually build cars. The whole economy was shifting from making things to just gambling. Well, like any good party, this one had to end. The Japanese government finally realized it had created a monster it couldn't control. So they suddenly slammed on the brakes, and they slammed on them hard, more than doubling interest rates. And just like that, the music stopped. The cheap money was gone, and the entire house of cards came crashing down. Companies were left holding stocks and land that were now worth a fraction of what they paid for them. But all that massive debt they took on, that was still there. The damage was it was catastrophic. We're talking about Japan's most famous, most iconic brands getting crippled. Nissan was buried under $20 billion in debt.
Sony's big Hollywood purchase turned into a financial black hole. And Toshiba, once the undisputed king of computer chips, was left paralyzed, which let a scrappy competitor called Samsung steal its crown.
Now, at this point, the government completely panicked. And instead of letting these failed companies just go bankrupt, clearing out the deadwood, they decided to prop them all up with endless loans. And in doing so, they created a zombie economy. So what exactly is a zombie company? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's the Walking Dead of the corporate world. These firms weren't growing or innovating. They were just there, shambling along, making just enough money to pay the interest on their loans, but never, ever the actual loan itself. They were sucking the life out of the healthy parts of the economy.
And the scale of this was just immense. We're not talking about a few bad apples. By the early 2000s, almost a third of all companies in Japan were zombies. And this decision to avoid short-term pain ended up creating 3 tragic long-term curses for the country.
So here's the triple whammy. First, all the money was trapped keeping these zombies alive, so there was nothing left for new, exciting ideas. Second, wages couldn't go up because these zombie companies were just desperate to sell anything at any price. And third, and this is the most heartbreaking part, an entire generation of young people couldn't get real jobs for a decade. They became a lost generation, and that social wound still hurts Japan today.
So, after all that, what can we possibly learn from this massive cautionary tale? What's the takeaway from Japan's lost decades?
Well, the story really leaves us with 3 huge lessons. First, sometimes you have to let failure happen. Zombie companies need to be allowed to die so that new, healthy companies can grow. Second, putting all your economic eggs in one basket, relying too much on one trading partner, is super risky. And third, having a lot of young people is only a good thing if you can actually give them the skills and the jobs they need to succeed. And that really is the crucial question, isn't it? Japan's story is so much more than just numbers and charts. It's a powerful warning about the very real, very human cost of trying to find short-term fixes for deep economic problems. It's a question every single country should probably be asking itself right now.